Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and man, I really appreciate you guys checking out today's video and spending some of your time with me. Today, guys, I want to talk about how different wind directions, east, south, north, and west, how it affects the bass biting, and sort of what the fish do as far as their mood and their personality based upon the direction of the wind, because this has a big impact on it. Man, I have seen this evident, ever since I've been fishing, as far as how bass behave sort of predictively based upon the wind direction. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, real quick before we get started, just a quick invitation. Anyone interested out there booking an on-the-water lesson with me, you can do that by going to my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler. Just shoot me a private message and I'll get you set up with that. And also, guys, please go into my video description here. Check out my Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns. We got our summer maps on the site right now. Great resources to get some good places for you guys to fish this summer that you can download straight to your GPS unit. So I'll put that link in the description as well. Really appreciate you guys supporting that. Okay, one of the things that you're going to find out about bass fishing is that weather has a big impact, on really how the fish react and the baits they want and the techniques that you need to fish. And one aspect of weather patterns is wind direction. There's a lot of different aspects of weather patterns. It can be barometric pressure, temperature, sunlight intensity, rain, precipitation, wind speed, everything. But wind direction directly affects bass behavior, in my opinion, from what I've seen. So what I want to do today is I sort of want to go through all the different wind directions that you're going to experience and sort of go over from my experience what the fish do at different wind directions. Okay, first of all, let's talk about a south or a southwest wind and a west wind to some extent. Let's group all three of those together. South wind, southwest wind, and a west wind. When you have wind direction out of one of those three areas, that is usually indicative of some type of a prefrontal condition. Usually stable weather patterns, or maybe not fronts on the way, but you usually have some stability with those weather patterns. And based upon the weather pattern and that direction of the wind and the wind speed, it has a lot to do with how the bass are going to feed. Now, most of the time when you are dealing with a wind direction out of one of those three areas, you have some type of a stable or falling barometric pressure. And based upon the systems that come in, you can have a wide range of cloud cover conditions. It can be cloudy, sunny, partly cloudy, whatever. But one of the things that I found out about bass fishing is when you have a southwest wind or a west wind, that tends to be your best fishing. It seems like the bass are a little bit more aggressive under those conditions, a little bit more conducive to feeding. And again, this is just a mystery. A lot of people don't understand how wind direction and light intensity and all that either makes fish bite or makes them not bite. But I can tell you from my experience that when you have wind out of those three directions, the bass are a little bit more aggressive. Now, one thing to remember about bass is they're always biting. It's like, don't ever go into this mindset that you're having a hard time catching them today and they're just not biting. They're always biting. And wind direction usually will dictate technique more than anything else. And one of the things I found out about a southwest wind or a west wind, this is the time that you want to fish your moving baits. Under these conditions, most of the time, crankbaits, spinnerbaits, topwaters, chatterbaits, any jerk baits, anything that you can move horizontally through the water column is a really good way to catch them. And of course, color and technique, are dependent upon your light intensity that is associated with each one of those wind directions. So if it sounds complicated, it is, because let's say, for example, if you have a south wind, there's literally 100 different things that are variables and other aspects of that south wind. It can be your temperature, it can be humidity associated with it, it can be the type of cloud, the thickness or the thinness of the cloud. It's just, there's a ton of stuff that goes with it, sunlight angle. But overall, when you get a south or southwest wind, fish your moving baits. And normally the harder the wind, the better those fish are going to bite out there, especially if that water temperature is over about 55 degrees. Now, when you get to a post-frontal situation or some type of a front that's moved through, a lot of times you have a north or northwest wind. This is typically associated with the passage of a cold front, and anytime that you have a north wind, fishing is a little bit tougher normally. And, a lot of this depends on the intensity of the front and how strong the wind was and the associated temperature drop with that wind. Now, here's one of the things I found out about a north or northwest wind after a front goes through. A lot of it depends on how long after the front goes through, how these bass react. Because let's say, for example, you have a front come through and that wind switches from the south out of the north, and you have a temperature drop, but you also have your cloud cover is maintained. Sometimes after a front, the clouds hang around. In those conditions, a lot of times you can keep on fishing the way you've been fishing. You can keep fishing moving baits, reaction baits, and they'll still bite it. But if you have a north or northwest wind and you have a bright bluebird sky that comes after a frontal passage with that north or northwest wind, that's when it gets tough. That's usually when it gets really tough. And under those conditions, a lot of it depends on the intensity of the wind on how you want to fish. If you have a windy post-frontal condition, let's say the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour out of the north, that wind will still keep those fish, even in a bright sunlight condition, hitting reaction baits a lot of times. Lipless crankbaits, that type of deal. But if you lose your wind and the wind dies down and you have a bright bluebird condition where you have a rising barometric pressure after the front, that's when those fish tuck down on the bottom. And that's when you're going to have to go to like dragging a football head jig, a shaky head, a worm, something like that, because those fish don't want to chase. If they lose their wind and they have a bright sunlight intensity, they're not going to want to come up and chase. A lot of times they'll either hunker down on the bottom or they get in really thick cover, middle of trees, underneath boat docks, in the middle of grass beds, something like that. And finally, on the east wind, there's an old saying in bass fishing, when wind blows from the east, the fish bite the least. I haven't found that to be true. I have found in my own experience that when you have an east wind, which is rare, you don't have an east wind very much unless you're on the East Coast. If you fish in Florida and along the eastern seaboard, you will get an east wind, fairly regularly. But for the rest of the country, an east wind is very uncommon. And I haven't noticed any particular behavior that the fish exhibit with an east wind. It's more about the sunlight intensity and the light intensity. I haven't noticed the fishing getting any better. I haven't noticed it getting any worse. I haven't noticed them preferring a moving lure over a slow lure on the east wind. Again, it's all relegated to, the water clarity and how strong the wind is, how much the temperatures drop. So in that sense, an east wind sort of fishes pretty similar to a south or southwest or west wind. There's not much difference, in my opinion. And again, like I said, you're not going to have to deal with with an east wind very much. But the main thing, guys, is just keep an open mind. I mean, you can have sort of a some guidelines like I just offered you there, but ultimately just let the fish tell you what they want. Experiment until you hit upon something, and that's usually the way you figure them out. So anyway, I hope it helps out, guys. We'll talk later.